Welcome back to the Chess Geek channel. Hopefully you guys are doing good. We are going to look at some of the most aggressive attacking games by Hikaru Nakamura, also some of the most unknown ones. So I picked two games which are less known, but they show some brilliant, concrete ideas by Nakamura. And at the time of recording this video, he is in the midst of the candidates tournament. He did just lose the first round game, but hopefully he can bounce back and maybe play Magnus Carlsen in the World Championship match. So in preparation for that being a possibility, I want to reflect a little and see some of the most brilliant moments from his games. So as I said, I handpicked two games, the first of which is Hikaru Nakamura against Krasenkow. This was from 2007. And the opening clearly showed signs of a very tactical and aggressive battle. Pawns flying everywhere, pieces capturing everything, so much pressure and tension on the board. You can see that Hikaru was feeling at home. We know that he is a absolute genius when it comes to calculation, and he proved it here in the game. And we saw knight to c6. Now, one of the major issues that a lot of people would be very concerned about is, understandably so, the queen being eyed down by the rook. And so I think it's quite natural to do something very immediate about that. I mean, there are certain threats in the position. White is clearly setting up a nasty idea where their whole point is to disconnect the queen from the knight, threatening bishop takes, and you cannot take back with the queen, and therefore the queen is attacked and the knight is lost, so you lose a piece. But Hikaru, not fearing anything, takes the knight with the rook. Now, if you were to take here, of course, you lose two pieces for an exchange, which is not too sufficient. It's roughly equal, but black has a nice advantage here because the bishop is feeling very lonely, and the light squares in general are super weak in this position. And that will be emphasized by the bishop landing on b7 and really taking the role of what this bishop used to do, which is to take full control on these light squares. So instead of taking, white took the knight here, thinking that they're winning a piece, the queen is attacked, it looks great. What they didn't expect is the crushing blow here. Queen takes f2, absolutely brilliant. And the point is, after king takes f2, there is now a crushing attack that Hikaru calculated moves ago. Of course, you wouldn't take the knight here if you didn't see this, because otherwise you truly are just losing a piece. And so Hikaru showed incredible calculation skills with queen takes f2. The whole point is after king takes, you play bishop to c5 check. The king moves up, and now rook takes. And because of the disparity in piece activity, these pieces here, although this is an open file, they're not doing anything too concrete, while these pieces are very much in the game. And in fact, every single piece in Hikaru's camp has to do some heavy lifting because, of course, the queen is gone. And that's exactly what Hikaru knew that the pieces could do. So king g4, and now the next blow, knight to e5. In the game, we saw king to g5. I should note, if you were to take here, you lose and become victim to bishop c8 check, rook takes, and here bishop takes rook. And a game continuation, for example, king to h4, this is now totally crushing. We can go check, and then we can very simply move the bishop back. And they don't have time because we're threatening so many nasty things. For example, if they were to go here, we can go check, then we can go check again, force them back, and here, among other things, there's a beautiful sacrifice. You can go rook to e5 check to distract the knight, to then free up this square for the bishop, and therefore land in a beautiful mating sequence. Queen to h5, only move, and now, of course, the beautiful g5 checkmate. Moving on to game 2, we have a 2020 match between Hikaru Nakamura and the one and only Magnus Carlsen. And this one I picked not only because of its true beauty, but also because, as I mentioned at the time of recording this, there's a chance that Hikaru Nakamura will play Magnus in the World Championship match. When you're watching this, I believe you would already know whether that is true or not. But regardless, I'm super excited if it happens, and I wanted to prepare for the event by looking at some of his highlights against the world champion himself. So we have this common tactic with d4 to begin the game, some quick expansions, and what you'll notice in this game is very early on, white has a space advantage on the king side. The pawn march of f5 really makes that abundantly clear with f6 on the way, bishop h6, and you can tell that attacking possibilities are very much in the air. Now, in this position, the bishop here pinning the pawn, black thought it was best to get rid of that bishop and make this rook a little awkward. So, d takes on e5, we have f6, and g takes on f6. Of course, the knight is attacked, the pawn is attacked, so the pawn took. And in this position, Hikaru played bishop a6, kicking the rook away, taking full control of the dark squares. But because of this knight's ability to jump to g5, none of the checks are actually too crushing currently. Here, white played a very nice positional move. If the rook was on a1, the most natural idea is, of course, to take, stack rooks, and just go for checkmate. But the rook is on a2, super awkward, and there's a few ways to deal with this. If the rook was on a3, one common idea is to go c4 to get the rook in, but on a2, it really doesn't have a good path. But then Hikaru found a beautiful rook a6 move. Really gorgeous positional concept. Of course, trying to take, so if they play a waiting move, we simply take, threatening this. I mean, the computer might prefer a move like queen f3. I believe that's what the engine showed, but the whole point, just to illustrate, is taking and then stacking the rooks in a very efficient and effective way, just taking two moves, and now the pawn here is in deep trouble. Now, in the game, Magnus could not let that happen, so he decided to trade off the rooks, and now we have a very funny looking pawn structure on the queen side, but that is frankly irrelevant because all the action is on the king side, and white doesn't care whatsoever about the pawn structure here because white has very aggressive intentions, even if the engine doesn't say, show that aggressive intentions are possible here, and objectively black and hold, Hikaru Nakamura had something else in mind. So he gives this check and h4, launching the pawn to h5, threatening to win the knight. And here Magnus makes a mistake. He plays f5, h5, f4. He presumably didn't realize when playing f5 that after h5, f4, Hikaru would play the brilliant queen sacrificing h takes on g6. And after f takes on g3, there is takes. And here you can take the rook, of course, and follow it up with rook check, and it's not even a question of whether white can convert that, with the pawns being so weak and isolated. If they were connected, maybe passed, it may be a different story, but every one of these pawns can be picked off one by one. So a beautiful concept here that Magnus must have missed, otherwise he wouldn't have gone for this. And after takes, he, as I mentioned, cannot take here. It's not going to end well, and instead he played h takes on g6. So the game continued queen to g4, but now the issue is not only is the material deficit hard to play against, but also just the positional deficit. I mean, the bishop is coming and mate is on the horizon. This forced a move like f5, not a great move. It weakens some key pawns next to the king's defense. And now a very simple maneuver, rook f3, followed by rook h3, will eventually seal the deal. We have check and eventually mate. So a beautiful attacking game. You know, when your pieces are attacked, you don't always have to move them. Always think, what if I don't move them? And continue with my intentions, totally forgetting about theirs. And I think in both of these games, that was highlighted. So Hikaru Nakamura, super strong player, and I'm very excited and hopeful that he will face Magnus Carlsen in the World Championship match. So thank you for watching this video. Subscribe if you're new around here. Like this video if you learned something new from it and want to see more content just like this. Check out my website at chessgeek.org, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Peace out.